Hey, dear listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, let's watch.
Island girl on a little banana boat wants to come and take his things.
The reality is, like, marriage is, yeah, you have a love component for sure, but you also have a business component as well, too.
Yeah, so I know most people, I think maybe everyone that watches this show doesn't like Bilal, at least anecdotally. So looked at a certain way, you're like, come on, Bilal, don't be a jerk face. But it is true. We use it as a jumping off point. We have perhaps criticized other people on the show for not considering the future or the finances. So he's thinking about it. Now, the way he went about it was pretty hurtful. And Shaeeda is talking with her family, and her family's like, oh, he's essentially being xenophobic or sexist or something, saying that, oh, you're just a Caribbean girl coming off the banana boat, and so he thinks you're just trying to get his money. And Shaeeda's like, yeah. So he could have gone about it differently. And this show, they often do it, and we can never know if this is accurate. The way that people often go about prenuptial agreements on this show is just so haphazard, you know? It's never like, hey, let's talk, da-da-da, da-da-da. It's always sprung on people, and there's lots of pressure, and it doesn't seem to be delivered in a very helpful way. You know, if you came at someone and said, look, I want to be with you forever, and no joke, I love you so much, and, you know, end of story. But, you know, people are telling me things and I'm getting worried, and I don't know, is it okay if we talk about maybe getting a prenuptial agreement? Not that I think it'll overcome it, you know, something like that, instead of like, well, why not a prenuptial agreement? And then the other person's like, this hurts my feelings, and there's just no conversation about it. So hopefully they will have a conversation about it. I'm guessing that won't happen, but maybe it will.
And so when people don't talk about finances, they say the number one reason why people get divorced is because of finances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the way that people summarize this research. The way that people, I think, are using that research finding is the way he's using it. It's just like, well, a lot of reasons why people get divorced is because of financial conflicts, and so I'm trying to get out ahead of that by getting a prenuptial agreement. But really, in my experience, what is happening underneath those fights about finances is attachment issues and attachment injury. So using this as an example, he thinks he's actually getting out ahead of the conflict and out ahead of the divorce by trying to get a prenuptial agreement. But if we look at the emotional content, the communication content, what's happening is that she is being humiliated and made to feel like she is shady Shaeeda, if you will, and is hurt that he would communicate in the way that he did, the way that he delivered it, the callous way in which it was brought up. And so that's hurting her feelings. The subject matter is money, but what's really happening is her feelings are hurt, which makes sense. So usually, if not always the case, at least anecdotally in my experience, when people are fighting about money, it's really these emotional attachment injuries that are happening instead, and misunderstandings.
What if she doesn't sign the prenup?
You know, that's a question that I've been baffling with. It's been something that I always said I need to have happen. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I don't want to let love go, but also, again, I'm not, I don't think blindly either, you know.
So if I heard that from a friend of mine or a client, I would say, it sounds like you're not quite trusting of her, that you think there's at least some level of a chance that she is in it for the money and doesn't really love you, or doesn't love you enough that the relationship will last, or that you think if you did break up that she would try to take everything from you. So are you sure that this is a good idea to be married to her at this point? Because sounds like your relationship isn't strong enough that you know her well enough. You know, like for me, when I married my wife, a prenuptial agreement never entered my mind. And she works, so there's not that issue, but I didn't think at all about that. Why? Well, because I had spent a lot longer than a few weeks dating her in person, and thus trusted that things would work out. So it makes sense that he has some question marks, and so maybe give it some more time with in-person dating before you get married. Then you'll know, oh, I trust her. I don't think it. Now, are prenuptial agreements always a problem? No. But the way that he's talking, it makes me wonder if their relationship is ready for long-term commitment.
He was married before, he had children, he had a life. Right, he's a divorcee, right? You never did any of these things. You also get into the game. You put a condition.
Yeah.
Want to have
You have your terms and conditions, most definitely.
Should I like say, okay, I want to have kids before 40?
Definitely.
I'm not a lawyer, of course, so I have no idea, but I can't imagine this in a prenuptial agreement being included, or at the very least being enforceable, right? Because if there's a breakup about money and there's stipulations about money in the prenuptial agreement, and say someone just refuses to hand over the funds, then there are things you can do, like you can garner their wages or fine them or something. But I get where she's coming from. I mean, she does want kids, but again, this points to the fact that they just don't trust each other. They don't know each other well enough. Imagine that. Imagine like you want a child and you are getting mixed messages from your partner, and you're like, well, I know what I can do. I'll work it into a prenuptial agreement that they have to have a child with me. Like, it just points to a complete lack of trust between the two of them.
If you really want it, if this is something you really want, then definitely put it in a prenup. It goes both ways. Time is ticking.
Honestly, I don't even know what her mindset is. She tends to be a little bit argumentative over some of the smallest things. She's distant. She's, which also makes me even more wary why I do need to have.
It's interesting to hear his perspective, because that's certainly not the way that I would describe what we've seen, and who knows what's really happening behind the scenes. But it's interesting to hear his perspective, and of course he's blaming her for everything. And he says, and that's why I'm suspicious, because she's so distant. And I'm like, well, did you ask yourself maybe why she's distant? Because she wasn't seemingly originally distant until some of the shenanigans happened.
Every person who's loved me or who I've loved back has left me.
Wait, what did he say? That was a powerful thing. Let's rewind that.
She's distant. She's, which also makes me even more wary why I do need to have something in place. I don't know. I just feel like every person who's loved me or who I've loved back has left me.
Wow. I think we have our answer as to the strongest hypothesis, or the majority of the cause of what's been going on with him, or at least the strongest hypothesis so far, that everyone that I've loved has left me. Something like that, right? And if that's his perspective, especially the way he delivered it, I don't know, the non-emotional way, it sounds like neglect, at the very least, a lot of pain in his relationships as an adult, maybe throughout his life. To think that and to assume that and to be wary of that, to be traumatized by that, you could imagine someone being distorted in their view of the other, such that they're overly suspicious of the other person. So that's interesting. I think that could explain a lot, right? All right, well, that is it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.